Hi, everyone. Welcome to the ASPRS Mentors podcast. I'm Greg Stamnes, co-chair of the ASPRS ACPC, or Early Career Professionals Council. We also have with us Youssef. Youssef, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Youssef. I'm the geometric specialist at the University of Florida, and I'm the chair of ECPC. And I want to welcome everybody who's watching us live now. And if you're watching us through the recording, we invite you to come to our meetings. It's every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, every Wednesday. And the link is on LinkedIn, and you will be able to just send us an email, look for ECPC, and you're more than welcome to join the live. And this podcast is meant to allow people who cannot attend live to get some mentorship experience from successful professionals like Mike Zoltek. We appreciate his presence today, and we have the podcast. We already have interviewed a lot of people, and having him today is going to even bring more visibility to our podcast. Thank you, Mike. Go.
You're welcome, Youssef.
Mhm.
Yeah, as Youssef mentioned, our guest this week is Mike Zoltek. We originally reached out to Mike regarding a podcast to provide information regarding certification. However, we were so intrigued by his story that we convinced him to be our first double whammy podcast guest. So uh, look forward to that additional podcast related to certification in about a month's time. And please send any questions to me in advance, and we'll be sure to ask Mike. Mike, are you okay with us recording this and sharing it on social media?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I guess first off, can you share your background and qualifications?
Sure. Let's see here. Sorry, I thought I had my bio up, but here we go. Basically, I'm a land surveyor and I'm a photogrammetrist. I'm also a GISP. I currently work for GPI Geospatial, where I'm the National Geospatial Programs Director, where I'm responsible for coordination, execution, and supervision of local, state, municipal projects. Um, I have a pretty wide background in surveying and mapping. I've done everything from data collection to project management to QA/QC coordination. Um, I hold active surveying registrations in 26 states. I am an ASPRS certified photogrammetrist. I'm a geographic information systems professional, and I'm a PMP. Um, I am a member of the Florida State Board of Professional Surveyors and Mappers, and I have been associated with ASPRS for about 15, 16 years now in a regular capacity, where I currently serve as the chair of the Evaluation for Certification Committee. In the past, I have been the assistant director and the director of the Professional Practice Division, and I have worked with the Standards Committee on the last two set of ASPRS standards, those that came out in 2014, and those just came out here in 2023. Um, I have taught technical seminars at universities and colleges, and been an expert witness on boundary litigation in Florida. And I'm always looking to expand my horizons and expand what I'm doing in the geospatial arena because it has constantly been changing for the last 30 years.
So, what inspired you to get into the geospatial arena?
Well, that's kind of a fun story. I originally was going into civil engineering at the University of Florida. I grew up in Gainesville. My dad was a professor of engineering there, and I just was following that family tract of engineers. Um, I ended up getting into the College of Civil Engineering, and I just didn't like it. Didn't like what I was doing. Didn't like what I thought I was going to be doing. And I ended up being a college dropout. I dropped out of college and I joined the military because I knew if I joined the military, I could get the GI Bill and college fund and go back to school one day if I ever figured out what I wanted. So I did that. I went back to school. And my first semester back, I was still in the civil engineering program because that's where I left off. And I took my first surveying class. We used to call it Plumb Bob 3101, Surveying 3101. Um, I really liked the class. I went to my first couple of classes. I went to my first lab, who the TA taught. Um, and at the time, since I was in and out of college, I was 22 years old. I went out for a beer with my teaching assistant, and we were talking about surveying. And I said, hey, what's your major? And he said surveying. And I went, wait, there's a major for this? Next thing I know, he had me in Dave Gibson's office. That's the guy who started the University of Florida Surveying and Mapping program. And after about 20 minutes in the office with Dave Gibson, I decided this was what was for me. An interesting side note, I gave my dad a call and said, hey, I'm dropping out of civil engineering again, which of course got an interesting response. And he said, what are you doing this time? And I said, I met this guy named Dave Gibson over in the surveying department, and it really sounds like a great program. And to my surprise, my dad said, I've known Dave for 25 years. I send all of my students to take his survey class because I think every engineer should know where the data comes from. And that was it. That ended up being in 1990, and I've been doing surveying and geospatial ever since.
So this Dave must have had some serious charisma skills if it only took him 20 minutes to convince you to
He
do
really
this course.
did. He really did have some. He really was a wonderful person, and I owe my current career to that man for convincing me to get into the surveying program at the University of Florida.
That's awesome. So what does a day in the life of Mike Zoltek look like nowadays?
As I mentioned, I'm the National Geospatial Programs Director for GPI Geospatial. Um, in a typical day, I'll coordinate with clients or subconsultants. Um, I manage some of our larger statewide municipal projects, such as our FDOT statewide contract, and we have a couple of contracts with water management districts. I typically manage those at a very high level, work with staff to get those jobs done. I work with our business development staff to come up with strategies to secure new clients, to try and find new markets for our products and services. I really love the operational side, and I have the opportunity on technological initiatives, new technologies, new software. How do we increase our productivity? How do we find the next thing that's coming in the geospatial industry and make sure we're a leader and not a follower? Um, I work with our operations divisions, remote sensing, field surveying, to look at our operational workflows and quality control procedures. I established the procedures to train our project managers. One of my favorite roles here is working with the young project managers just on things like how to track a project, how to track project timelines, the money, what are the goals, doing the financial analysis of a project, make sure things stay on track. That's kind of a mentor thing. Um, every quarter, I have to go to a board meeting because I do serve on the Florida State Board of Professional Surveyors and Mappers, which requires a little bit of side time for that. And as I mentioned, I serve on the as the committee chair for the ASPRS Evaluation for Certification Committee, where I help oversee with Danielle, who's on the phone right now, the implementation of our certification exams and administration of the program. So I get to do.
I think we lost Mike. All right, we had some technical difficulties there, but we're back. Uh, what are some essential skills and technologies that early career professionals should focus on developing?
Oh, wow. All of them. um, and I say that because the geospatial industry changes so much. I started off my career with a focus on boundary survey and high accuracy design surveys for the Departments of Transportation, doing sectional work, doing construction layout. And then 15 years later, back in 2009, I kind of transitioned back into the remote sensing world. Um, I think that what really would benefit people is what you typically find in a college level degree program. Um, when I was at the University of Florida, I had classes in geodesy and remote sensing in GIS. I actually had a GPS class because back then it was new. So I had a college level semester course on just GPS. I had multiple courses in photogrammetry. I had route surveying classes. I had field surveying techniques. I had field surveying calculations. I even took a drafting class. We drafted by hand back in the day. So I think every skill that you can find and get exposed to is important because you never know what's going to happen. Um, and as I said, it gave me really the ability to reinvent myself on more than one occasion as the market changed.
So a diverse skill set, develop a diverse skill set, and also experience is
And
beneficial to any early career
and
professional.
try and get new training. I was on a Regal webinar today learning about their new LiDAR sensors um, during lunch. It's you should always try and find out what's the latest and greatest because what is new today is what everybody will be doing in 2 or 3 years, and you always want to get a jump on it. So anything geospatial related is great to focus on. And what do you love? Focus on what you love. Like I said, I really love the boundary side of things, and that's where I started my career. And for a variety of reasons, I really don't do that anymore, but that's great. I was able to transition.
That's perfect. Those some of those webinars have been the greatest source of insights for some of my own learning over the past few years. Every time I see one, I just sign up for it and listen to it in the background. They're great.
And I have a YouTube. I have my own YouTube channel, and I subscribe to a whole bunch of things there. It's amazing what you can find, and not just anybody, but even Regal has a YouTube channel. Leica has a YouTube channel. All the software and camera developers, the people that support what we do, almost all of them have channels, and it's great to just catch one a week on a Saturday, even if it's 20 minutes. It lets you know what the other people are doing and where the industry is going. You really do get a feel for it.
Yeah, it helps you keep up with emerging trends. Do you see any emerging trends right now in the industry, and how are they shaping the future of the field?
Well, right now, I think the advancements in computer computational speed, which is really why we can use drones these days, will continue to create new opportunities and advanced workflow. I mean, structure from motion calculations from thousands of images that are done in the UAS photogrammetry world couldn't be done 20 years ago because the computer just couldn't do those calculations. The more that a computer can do, the more new things we'll be able to actually implement. Um, we see it now with machine learning models and advanced computational algorithms for in photogrammetry and LiDAR specifically, because traditionally LiDAR and photogrammetry had a lot of manual work and a lot of manual labor to process the data. Um, I think crowdsourcing of data combined with AI is going to have a huge impact on the geospatial mapping community. Uh, has anybody ever ridden in a Tesla? I don't know if you've ridden in a Tesla and looked at the screen. While you're traveling, they show you in real time lane lines, street lines with actually the correct mile per hour on a speed limit sign, the traffic lights with the color of the traffic lights. You see traffic cones, all these things in real time while you're driving. And I'm starting to wonder why would we need to collect a highway with a mobile LiDAR unit when hundreds or thousands of Teslas are driving along that roadway if we could be crowdsourcing that data somewhere um, and providing that real time with pictures. Um, Imagine if a bunch of Teslas drove by an accident. Google Maps and Apple Maps and Waze, they already tell you there's an accident ahead. They already tell you you're slowing down. What if, as you were driving by that location, Elon Musk was downloading your camera information um, and pumping it up to the Florida Department of Transportation where they could see a vehicle? You could see what the vehicle was. You could see the damage of the vehicle. More importantly, what if you saw that 30 feet of guardrail was taken out? What if that would automatically create a work order ticket for the DOT crew that's got to go clean something up? Just think about what we could do. If we can think about it today and you can do it manually, in 10 years, somebody's going to be doing automatically. So again, I think this crowdsourcing of data combined with AI is going to be an incredible source of geospatial information for us.
It's kind of the democratization of mobile laser scanning, is what it
Right.
sounds like.
And you could talk about, I hear people talk about survey grade accuracy and GIS grade accuracy. is that really what's important, or is knowing that you have information and something you need to get from a particular location? Like I said, the traffic accident is a great example. If everybody's driving by, the way most of these drive yourself cars work is they have cameras all around them. Why can't we get that data and see what's happening in real time? It's going to come.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk about some of the challenges you faced in your career and how you addressed them and lessons learned from them?
Oof. I think one of the biggest challenges to any early career professional is not getting pigeonholed into a role that doesn't allow you to expand your interests or your potential. Um, Unfortunately, I think that the better, for lack of a better word, a person is, the more likely they are to get placed in a role that they excel at. And then an employer looks at this person and says, "This is the best person I have in this position." It's understandable that that employer may be a little bit remiss to let them change roles. Why would I take my best person in their current role and have them do something else? Um, but there's a way around that, and that is for employees and the employers to have candid conversations about what they want to do, about what they are doing, about their expectations for growth, and make sure everybody understands what's going on. I can tell you that as an employer, the only thing worse than taking my best person out of their current role would be to lose that person completely. And I've seen that happen time and time again in my career, where you can't take your best right-of-way mapper or your best uh, photogrammetric compiler. You don't want to take them out of their role because they're just so good at it, but then they get unhappy doing the same thing every day. So again, having a regular is the responsibility of both an employer and an employee. And it's something I've learned to pay very close attention to, because I have seen great people be unhappy with a lack of expansion in their roles or opportunities and decide to leave for something else. And that's the worst thing that can happen. That's worse than me taking you out of compilation and losing you as my best person, is me losing you as a company. And we all just need to continue to talk about that and have that level of communication.
Thanks for that information. It's great. Can you talk about any specific networking opportunities or professional organizations you can recommend for geospatial experts?
Um, I think there's quite a few of them out there. I believe that any scientific organization that focuses on the geospatial industry is worthwhile. ASPRS, GISC are great. Professional societies in your state, every state has them for engineering and surveying, et cetera. I think getting involved with those are good. You don't have to be a licensed land surveyor to be part of the Florida Surveying and Mapping Society. But there's a lot that goes on there. I think people should look where they live and try to see what's around them. I think you should talk to your employers and see what your coworkers are doing, what organizations that your firm is involved with. Um, there's a lot of them out there, and being accessible is probably the most important thing. A lot of organizations have regional chapters, and getting involved with that, I think, is very important. You'll see your peers and get to have conversations with people you wouldn't necessarily get to if you're just talking to the people you work with. Um, so I think if you Googled in your area, you could find a lot.
So I guess tying into what you were talking about before, those candid conversations with your employer and professional organizations, what role does continuous learning play in staying relevant in the geospatial industry?
Um, I think that continuing education is really, really important. I think I mentioned before about being classically trained and having my career change a few times. Um, I'm constantly doing continuing education to keep my licenses up. And I think that given how quickly things change in the geospatial world, you really need to stay up on things. I mean, as I mentioned, I took a GPS semester course in college. When I was running When I was going to college, the GIS program was on a mainframe. Um, Photogrammetry was just starting to get, they were just starting to think about getting it out of the analog field. You know, the first digital aerial camera wasn't very viable until the late 90s. If I relied just on what I learned in my college degree, my knowledge would have been out of date 10 years later, and I wouldn't have been able to do anything. So I think in this industry, continuing education is absolutely important.
Perfect. So this question, so if I'm an early career professional and I look at the leadership team of the ASPRS, I often see a lot of professors and PhDs all over the place. So I'm wondering, how can I work my way up to become a leader within ASPRS? And does getting my PhD, is that necessary?
I would say absolutely not to have your PhD. All you have to do at ASPRS to become a leader is start volunteering. There's lots of committees, and you don't have to be an assistant director or director of a division. You don't have to be the chair of a committee. There are a tremendous amount of volunteer opportunities. Um, that's how I started back in around 2010 is when I started to get heavily involved in ASPRS. I got on a committee. I started working with people. I was asked by a friend to volunteer for the professional practice division because I had a couple of state licenses and they were looking to make sure that ASPRS was looking at the larger picture of licensure and certification. A couple of years later, I ended up being the assistant director of the professional practice division for 2 years. Then I was the director. While I was the director, I met Dr. Qasim Abdullah, who was looking for volunteers to be on the 2014 ASPRS Standards Committee. I volunteered for that. Um, a couple of years after that, the person who was the chair of the Evaluation for Certification Committee was retiring, and they needed someone else to take that lead. And because I was active in the organization, I was asked if I could pick that piece up because it is related to the professional practice division. And I've been doing that for the last 5 years. So no, being an academic is not necessary. It's good to have some academic expertise. Um, but you don't have to be a PhD. Interestingly enough, ASPRS actively looks for three distinct areas to pull their volunteers from, that being academic, practicing professional, and government agencies, because they believe these are the three legs of the stool that keeps our organization balanced and focused on serving all pieces of our industry. So it's not just academic, you need the practicing professionals and you need people from government because that's a huge part of the industry and traditionally where the vast majority of geospatial work happened. Before smaller companies could buy drones and UASs, most of the photogrammetric and LiDAR work was all done for large contracts because it was very expensive. But now that these things are cheap enough for a company to buy, for a small business to buy, everybody's using it. So you've got to keep everybody involved in what's going on in a truly comprehensive scientific organization like ASPRS. So again, no, you don't have to be a PhD. We look for pieces from everybody to contribute to the whole organization.
Perfect. I know that's sometimes an intimidating thing to look at the list of people that are currently leading and look at their experience and their qualifications and go, geez, how am I ever going to get there? But just getting involved is the first step. So.
Volunteer on something small, find something you like. There's so many opportunities and so many focus areas within ASPRS. They have specialty areas on sensors and equipment if you're that PhD guy. They have areas of professional practice if you're a surveyor or a photogrammetrist. And as I said, the government relies a lot on some of the things that we do, our standards. So we need people from government giving input. The standards committee specifically asked for multiple members from each of those areas so that we could be sure we had standards that would fit what everybody needed.
All right, I'm going to shift gears on you a bit here. can you share a success story or inspiring moment from your career that motivated you to continue working and kept you passionate about the geospatial industry?
I don't think I ever wanted to leave. So I don't know that anything motivated me to continue other than I went from that very first class. I really, really loved it and I have continued to. Um, but I guess a moment of difficulty was back in around 2008, 2009, when the housing market took a dive. Um, that had a huge impact on all manner of traditional surveying work. And at the time, I was working for a surveying and mapping company doing traditional boundary transportation construction work. Luckily, I also found myself in a position during that time when Florida changed its regulations to regulate photogrammetry. I started working with a lot of photogrammetrists that needed ground control, needed to know how to write reports, and that sort of thing. So for the few years before that, I was starting to get pulled back into more of a geospatial side. So in 2009, there were a lot of firms that were closing. There were people getting laid off. Businesses were shrinking. The market was tough. And
All right, more technical glitches, but Mike was sharing that he found his calling, so that's good to hear. Mike, is there anything else that we missed? That I know I sent you out the questions in advance, so I just want to make sure there wasn't anything burning there that I missed.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, you asked about a particularly interesting, did you ask about a particularly interesting or challenging project? I don't think you mentioned that, and lessons I learned from it. I don't think I answered that question.
Yeah,
Um,
I kind of combined them into a few, but let's hear it. If you have one, let's hear it.
Yeah, really, one of the coolest projects I've gotten a chance to work on was a few years ago. We were working for one of the water management districts in Florida, and I went to a meeting and with their lead engineer down there, and they were looking to do a floodplain study a few miles along one of their canals, which, okay, that's easy. We'll fly that with imagery and LiDAR and do a floodplain study. But then their drainage engineer said, hey, we also want a hydrological survey of the canal bottom. So I said, all right, we'll be able to figure that out. Then their facilities guys said, hey, while you're there, which are four dreaded words, you never want to sit here when you're in geospatial. But hey, while you're there, he said, can you scan our pump stations? So they had these pump stations all along this water management district canal, and I said, all right, I think we can do that. So to make a long story just a little shorter, we ended up using traditional surveying methods to set all of our control. We collected an aerial LiDAR and imagery survey along 7 miles of canal that was a half a mile each side of the canal. We hired a subconsultant to do the hydrological survey, go out there on a boat and get the bottom of the canal. We sent our crews back out to do terrestrial scanning of all the pump stations. We ended up using the aerial photography to map all the roadways and pull out the brake lines to get a better dam out of our LiDAR. And then we packaged this entire project into a single homogeneous point cloud data set, basically a 3D model, containing all this information so that they could have one data set. And we created one seamless ground dam, pretend the water's not there. So with ground dam of the surrounding floodplain and the bottom of the canal. And we had this wonderful giant project for them, which taught us a great lesson. Always ask your client how big of a file they can handle, because we ended up cutting this thing up into multiple segments because the drainage engineer software could only take an AutoCAD file of a certain size. The floodplain gentleman software could only take contours of a certain size. And they just did not have the computing power we did. Remember, we can do the aerial imagery, the LiDAR. We have such great software packages and computers that we could deal with that. And the most difficult part of that project, which was a great project, was learning the limitations of the client's ability to handle the data. Essentially, we ended up cutting this thing in 2,000-foot segments. So 7 miles, 2,000 feet, that's somewhere around 18 different segments that we had to parse the project up with so they could work with it one at a time. So another good learning experience. How big of a file can you open is something to always ask a client when you're playing with large geospatial data sets.
Yeah, that's for sure. Why are those projects so neat? The data fusion projects. I haven't figured it out yet, but I find them fascinating, like recreating the world digitally. It's something about it.
Yep, it really is a cool thing.
One of the ways that we kind of in the past were sharing that data was using ArcGIS Online Web Experience, 3D web experiences, and combining it all in there, and it kind of helps those. I always call them like the the boomer engineers of the companies. Actually, they're the ones that order for their services or data to be collected, but then they don't really have much to do with it after that. So it allows them to go in there and actually see what they paid for and navigate data. And yeah, it's neat. We have a question here from a guest. Saul, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, yes. Mike, I found very interesting your answer regarding how can AI be implemented in the spatial industry. I'm curious, do you foresee AI impacting technical roles within the geospatial industry in the near future? If so, what magnitude of impact do you anticipate on entry level positions like drafting or processing? There are many unknowns regarding what AI can do in the future in processing positions or drafting positions. So I'm wondering your opinion regarding that.
I, I think what AI is going to take over is the repetitive tasks, the
Okay.
things that don't take a lot of analytical evaluation. I think there's kind of an 80-20 rule that I've read about machine learning and AI that says, yes, the computer can do about 80% of it, but if the last 20% is where it's really hard to copy a human brain in the analysis part of it, where I can look at three disparate data sets across three different screens and say, hey, that doesn't look right to me. Let me go investigate. I think that's going to be, I think we're a pretty far way off, relatively speaking, from AI doing that,
Okay.
which I think means we're going to be looking for a little bit different type of person. Um, I won't need somebody to necessarily calibrate my LiDAR data as I'm flying LiDAR, but I still need somebody to validate the calibration that's done automatically. I
Okay.
think what's going to happen is you're going to find that the level of experience and knowledge that are needed, even for our entry level people, are going to be a little bit higher than they traditionally have been. Traditionally, you can get an entry level job. Somebody teaches you how to do one task. You get good at that task. You learn how to do another task. And over time, when you've learned how to do 5 or 6 tasks, now you know how all 5 or 6 of those things go together.
Mhm.
Now I can manage this group of tasks and make sure that they're coming out correctly or accurately, quality control side of things. And I think we're still going to need the project managers and the technical leads, but I don't think that those people are going to have a staff of 20 doing repetitive tasks for them. They'll have a staff of 1 or 2 making sure the computer's doing it right. And then you'll have that one lead that is looking over the rest of that work. So I think because that's the easiest thing for AI and machine learning to do is those repetitive tasks.
Okay.
Um,
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question,
Okay.
Mike.
sure.
You mentioned that. Thank you for sharing your story. Very inspiring, and this is really something like I'm sure all early career people will appreciate. But I want to ask you a specific question. We always invite people to come to ASPRS, join ASPRS. There is so much value for your career, for your everything, development, education, certification. So since you started your career without ASPRS and in 2010 you joined ASPRS, when you look back, do you think you say I should have joined earlier? It might have made a big difference. Just, I want your insight regarding that.
Well, I actually was a student member in ASPRS
Uh-huh.
back when I was in college, because that was something that when we were in college, you could get a student membership, complimentary student membership. So I was familiar with the organization from that time. Um, which was why in 2008, 2009, when I started to do so much support work for photogrammetrists and aerial LiDAR folks, which was what was really the beginning of a lot of this geospatial stuff that we do today, um, that I remembered ASPRS. And that's why I started getting involved. I took that job and said, hey, I'm taking a job, going to be more into photogrammetry. I remember ASPRS. I need to get more involved with this organization because they're kind of the gold standard for the scientific community in geospatial. So it's not that I didn't know who they were, but during that first 15 years of my career, staying traditionally on that boundary, on the ground surveying side of things,
I see.
it just wasn't that relevant.
Okay. Okay.
But as
That's
soon
good.
as I started getting in more into uh, that remote sensing photogrammetry world, I said, hey, I got to get back into this organization because there's a lot of value to be had there.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mike.
And the other thing I would say, Youssef, is it's very different today. Um, you know, when I was in college in the 90s and when I graduated in the early 90s, you kind of picked a path. You either went the ground surveying side or you liked remote sensing. Those were kind of two separate paths. But now you can't find the smallest of survey company that doesn't have a UAS that's flying some sort of remote sensing for imagery. A lot of the medium-sized companies have LiDAR on a UAS. You don't have, they're not separated anymore. It's all coming together. And I think that's one of the greatest values that ASPRS now brings to everybody is it's not photogrammetrists on the right and surveyors on the left. We're all doing the same type of work. Is mobile, here's a question for you, Youssef. Is
Mhm.
mobile LiDAR in a van remote sensing or surveying?
Remote sensing or surveying?
The answer is yes.
Remote
It's
sensing, I would say.
and both. It's both.
Both. Yeah, you're right.
It's both. It's both. And those lines are getting blurred. So
Very good question.
I think ASPRS is more relevant than it ever has been because it
I,
affects all the surveyors now too.
I like what you mentioned about surveying and geospatial is becoming one. So here's my other question. So you mentioned in 2008 the job market was really affected, so you went more into photogrammetry. So now with the geospatial field growing like really everywhere, like every single company has a mapping department, every single, like we know, Uber has a mapping department, Google, Facebook, Amazon, everybody now they need geospatial data. Do you think I would say, do you think it's still I would say can get affected the same way in the past if something happens? Or the fact that it's needed everywhere, it's gonna be
I,
less.
I think that the market is now so diverse
Yeah.
that the same kind of thing won't happen. Now, if all you do is a particular type of surveying, that lack of diversification is always a risk.
Mhm.
But the diversification that's necessary just to even have a small or medium-sized business now, like I said, everybody's got a drone. Everybody can fly their own imagery for a site. Um, everybody, almost everybody of any significant size can get a VUX on a UAS for $80,000 and fly LiDAR. When I started, the GPS group was its own group in our organization. You were paying $50,000 for a GPS unit. You had to have special training to use GPS because nobody did it. Now it's just another tool in the toolbox. UAS has become just another tool in the toolbox, even for surveyors. Surveyors use UAS. Traditional photogrammetrists are still flying airplanes. It's funny at our company, we have airplanes, and now we have in the last few years invested more and more in UAS so that we can take that side of the market as well and provide those services to people. It's all coming together. And the more diversification you have, the better off you are.
We have a question in the chat. Andy, you want to ask the question?
Sure.
Go ahead, Andy.
The leading software. What is the leading software for object-based image analysis and feature extraction? I am not an expert in that area. This is changing so much. I can tell you the last time I was really involved with it, eCognition was one of the big pieces of software. Whatever is the best piece of software today is it'll probably be in the top 3 next year, but there'll probably be something else. The incredible growth in technology, these companies coming out with things, who knows what'll be the next greatest thing next year. There's so much opportunity there.
And it depends on the training. So it's if you train a software with the specific sensor and you have massive data, that's going to be the best one for extraction. So it's still at this stage, it's still a little bit sensor dependent, I would say.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, Mike, because now after telling your story, a lot of people are gonna be inspired. They might want to talk to you. I know you are available in Geo Week, and that's why we're doing the podcast. We want people, when they see you after the presentation, they can go and ask more specific question about your journey, and they feel that they know you. So if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
You can reach out through LinkedIn. I will be at GeoWeek starting on Saturday because I'll be at the board meeting on Saturday night for ASPRS, and I'm not leaving till Wednesday morning. My company, GPI Geospatial, will have a booth there on the exhibit hall. So I will either be in ASPRS sessions or I will be there. Shoot me a message on LinkedIn and we'll see if we can find a time to get together. I'll let people know when I'm going to be in the booth to make it easy to stop by, or we could meet somewhere else at a
We have
session
an
or whatever.
ECPC. We reserved the meeting room, ECPC, on Monday at 1 p.m. If you're available, all the ECPC people that are watching our podcast, they're going to be in that one room, and Jordan is going to be representing ECPC. So we would really appreciate. We will send you an invitation regarding that.
Okay,
If you're
I should be able to
available,
do that.
yeah, a lot of our guest speakers, we're planning to invite them to be in that room. Just we want to give the opportunity for people to have an in-person experience with their mentors, I would say.
Yeah, I could absolutely do that. I will also be leading at 9 a.m. on Monday, the evaluation for certification committee meeting. You're at 1, I'm at 9. So if anybody wanted to stop by to that, to say hello, or if they had specific questions about the certification program at ASPRS, that would be a great time to stop by.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Thanks for sharing your story. It was great to hear. Lots of insightful information there. And a reminder to anybody that we are going to have Mike back, double whammy certification podcast. So get your questions out to me, and we'll be sure to ask Mike during that in about a month's time from today, January 24th, plus or minus a few weeks. We haven't determined a date yet. So thanks again, Mike.
Anytime. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, everybody.